Alpine Liquid Fertilizers is your full season crop fertility specialist from start to finish. Visit alpinepfl.com for more.
Okay, let's talk some wheat for 2025. Joining us is a couple fine guys from Limagrain Cereal Seed, LCS. Up first, Zach Thibault, based out of Bozeman, Montana. Zach, how are we doing?
I'm doing pretty well. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, what do you do at LCS?
I'm a regional commercial sales manager for the Mountain West region, so that would include Montana, Wyoming, and Utah. I'm based out of Bozeman, Montana, and spend most of my time up in the Golden Triangle area as well as over in the eastern part of the state, where most of those farm acres are.
Yeah, traveled a lot of that area with my two boys baseball, so know the Golden Triangle very well. Also joining us here today is Troy Gerding, who is based out of Fargo, North Dakota. Troy, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Shaun. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, talk about your region.
Yeah, so I am the regional commercial manager for the Northern Plains here at Limagrain Cereal Seeds. That encompasses North Dakota, South Dakota, and Minnesota, primarily the Red River Valley of Minnesota. It's where we see most of the wheat, probably about 1 million to 1.5 million just in that region there in Minnesota.
So Troy, let's start with you. From as you look at 2025, there is, especially in that area that you're, the states that you're talking about, there's a lot of cropping options. Like there's other, other different directions a lot of growers can grow. From your vantage point, why do you think that wheat fits very well into the rotation in those states?
Well, taking a look at everything as a whole, not to mention just the rotation in and of itself, looking at cash prices or pricing on other crop types right now, everything's down. So putting in your spring wheat where you might have a little less input, a little less cost on the upfront, on seed, on fertilizer, etc., you're really going to, I think, come out ahead compared to putting in something like corn, canola, where you got really, really high input costs, really, really high seed pricing. I think just in general, if you stick with that rotation, you're not going to be coming too much behind. I think you'll be coming ahead.
Yeah, and Zach, you're in an area where moisture always seems to come at a premium, and there's weather stress, heat during the growing season as well, like we kind of experienced in 2024. Wheat's one of those crops that it weathers it better than some of the other options that are out there.
Yeah, and the major concern for a while there was the warmer months that we saw in November and December. But recently, just after the new year, we got hit with a pretty big snowstorm that covered a good portion of the state. And, we still aren't at the moisture levels we want to be yet. But we are starting to make up ground with kind of just the eastern part of the state there, lacking the moisture that the rest of the state got blessed with. But, we still got a long way to go. The majority of our snow the past couple of years has come in the January and February months. And, that has the folks that planted winter wheat, they're soaking it in. So the guys that are fortunate enough to plant the spring wheat, I do urge them to do that. Because if it does rain, you want to make sure that you have that crop in the ground. And like you said, wheat it can be durable if you select the correct variety for your growing conditions, and it can produce when it needs to, and in the harder times.
Yeah, from a variety selection standpoint, Zach, what are some of the key? Like, talk about that a little bit more. Dive into that a little bit in terms of making sure you got the right variety fit for your locale and your situation.
Yeah, so I guess the first thing I urge guys to do is know your soil type. Number one, by finding out what you have to deal with, that's the first step. And then, plugging in whether it's a acidic soil variety, one that needs to be more durable. Know your precip. A lot of these guys now know their precip. So Maturity is going to be a bigger thing as well. The earlier they're maturing, the better, and you can get through that stress section a little bit earlier. And then also just making sure that you do mitigate your risk with the varieties that you select for your farm. Protein premiums have kind of gone down in some way in our area. But it's not necessarily the premium that the guys are chasing. They're wanting to avoid the discounts and dockage that they're going to get for a lower protein variety. So just kind of, making sure you capitalize on protein, but also don't lose out on a bunch of that yield that you're getting that you're losing with those higher protein performing varieties.
Yeah, and Troy, a part of that too is for some growers, they make the mistake, I think, of, oh, that's, I intensely manage these other crops, and then I got wheat over here. No, manage the wheat the same way.
Yes. I've always had the thought of, if you're going to do something, you got to start it right. And if you don't start your wheat right, if you don't, make sure you have good seed, make sure you're doing your work beforehand with, weed management, with all of your inputs, getting those in the ground. If you're not planning for a bumper crop and you cut back, your nitrogen, you're not going to get as much as you could have. So if you manage it like corn, manage it like a cash crop that it is, you're going to do a heck of a lot better than you would if you just sat back and, been run your seed for 10, 15 years, which I have members of my family that have been doing that for quite a while. And, you just got to treat it as everything else, like your corn, like your beans, out west, like your field peas, chickpeas, the canola. Put the time and effort into the wheat, and it'll repay you. It's not something to look at or, be an afterthought.
Yeah, one of the things, guys, that I've been talking to audiences about in speeches is clearly there's growers, because of the economic climate that we have, there's growers, paying attention to cost cutting, right? And where can I trim my expenses? And that makes sense. That's, good business practices. Being aware of where your finances are. But we need to make sure, especially on that nutrient side, so wheat is a good option. I'm going to put some spring wheat in for a number of reasons. Making sure, though, I give that crop the opportunity. And so really having a firm understanding about not all costs are bad, and understanding which costs I'm incurring that are giving me a benefit and a net return that's positive versus the ones that maybe aren't. And you mentioned fertilizer as one of those. There's probably a few others as well. I want to make sure we don't go too far with it, so to speak, and we end up because of our self-inflicted decision, we end up costing ourselves more in the long run because we were so focused on the upfront costs. Troy, does that make sense to you?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was getting at. Managing that from the get-go. You said going too far, but going too short as well on your inputs. I think you hit it right on the head.
Yeah, Zach. Before we started having the chat, we were kind of discussing one of the other benefits of wheat is from a soil health perspective. And to talk about that a little bit in terms of some of the conversations you have with some of your customers.
Well, I think that, a big benefit to having wheat is the ability to keep all that stubble back. Throughout my territory, we see high winds in 90% of this region. And if you're able to keep a little bit of that stubble back, it allows the grower and the farmer to capitalize on the little snow that they might get throughout the year. That stubble keeps that snow from blowing throughout I would say county, not just field, because that stuff just seems to go. So having a little bit of that debris back allows that moisture really sink into the ground. And, snow and moisture, they come at a high price the last couple of years. So being able to make sure we can capitalize on what we do get is crucial in selecting either spring wheat or winter wheat for your farm.
Yeah. Zach, I was talking to a grower earlier this week from the Palouse region in Washington, and he was talking about, one of the reasons why I'm paraphrasing what he said. One of the reasons I love growing wheat and cutting wheat is because also I know I have a market. So there are some other options and there are some stories, being told, if you grow this, you can net this and, it looks all great on a spreadsheet. But I know I have a market for my wheat, which I think is also when times are tighter from profitability, it's also there's also some less risk from the marketing standpoint, I think, in that regard as well.
Yeah, the nice thing about wheat, and Troy and I kind of talked about this in the past, is wheat's one of those crop where we're always going to have a market for it. So if you are in a position in your farm to where you can sit and store grain and kind of play that futures game and watch that futures price a little bit, it allows some of these folks to make a little bit of more money in the end and sit on a little bit larger amount of grain as opposed to feeling like you need to sell it all at once. With the wheat market, you can contract X amount at X price and then hold on to the rest until you feel like you're getting a better price for it at the end. It's not something that always necessarily needs to go to the elevator at harvest. So I think as more folks start to realize the flexibility they have with this crop, the more they're going to realize that, okay, it might not be the typical boring wheat year that we've seemed to have the past 10, 15 years.
Troy, are there other agronomic considerations in terms of answering this question? Hey, is wheat a good option for me in 2025 that come to mind that we haven't discussed?
Well, I think one thing that I mentioned earlier is your crop rotation. I see a lot of people, or in the past, I've seen quite a few farmers kind of chasing the dollar, and really there's nothing to chase this year. So go back to your rotation. Make sure you're sticking with it, and you get a lot out of that if you keep a good crop rotation, chemical rotation. You're going to come out in the long run if you do that. Instead of just jumping year to year in and out of things, higher, lower, what have you, you're going to benefit your soil better, benefit your weed control better. All of that comes into play. So I think it's just crucial to look at that as a whole. Look at how many plantings and harvests you have, because as a farmer, if you take over the farm at 25, you have 40 years possibly. So that's 40 seasons. That's not a lot in the grand scheme of things. Yeah. So really you need to be looking at that in the long run and making sure you're getting in that good crop rotation.
Well, here's the other piece too that fits into the rotation part of this discussion is the sequencing. Mm-hmm. And let's not forget, because there is so much research that shows the benefit of it's not, we've talked about wheat as isolated into the 2025 year. And we need to do that because short-term economics matter as well. Mm-hmm. But it's also what's coming after that 25 wheat crop that you're going to be putting in the ground for the 26 crop, and the benefit that the wheat crop in this year has on next year and what you're growing. That's also, I think, a piece a lot of times, Troy, that is not given enough attention to.
Oh, absolutely. And even out west in Zach's area, western North Dakota, Montana, what did you have in the ground this year? Did you have field peas? Did you have lentils? Did you have chickpeas? Montana State's done studies, and they've seen an increase in yield the year after a post crop in wheat, mainly because of that excess nitrogen stored that those post crops fixate. So,
Zach, for you, any other agronomic considerations that we need to hit on when it comes to this question of is wheat a good option for 2025?
No, I think Troy kind of hit it on the head there. We do see a lot of pulses in this area as well. But my only thing is if folks are questioning these other crops that are seeing the price decline, I don't think they would get hurt as bad with wheat as they would with these other crops, mainly because the marketability, like we touched on. There's a lot of uncertainties that could come up, in the next couple months around the pulse contracts and marketing. And malt barley lately has been pretty terrible because it tends to follow the wheat market as well. And, wheat, it only takes a couple timely rains. I know that seems like we're asking a lot right now, especially given the last couple growing seasons, but it is a durable crop, and it only takes a couple timely things to go right our way for it really to blow it off the spreadsheet. So
yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Troy.
Oh, I was just going to expound on that a little bit. He talked about, the timely rains. Looking in my region here in South Dakota and western North Dakota, we've been seeing a drought here this whole fall, an extreme drought in quite a large chunk of the territory, and just bumping down to severe. So that is something to look at as well. What crop are you going to be putting in, and is it going to be able to manage it if you don't get those timely rains? And I think wheat's one that you can put in and know that you're going to get a crop off. It's not going to need as much as something like corn, sunflowers, etc.
Yeah, managing your risk. I like that. That's from an agronomic perspective. Hey, guys, this has been fantastic. Really appreciate both of you joining us here today. Thanks so much. And you know what? Like all the growers and audience that is listening, have yourself a great 2025.
You as well. It's been a pleasure, Shaun.
Thank you. You as well.